Today's Evening First Alert Weather Show is brought to you by Bresky Siding.
And a good Tuesday evening, Mid-Michigan. Chief Meteorologist Chris Eastlick with your Tuesday night forecast update, and of course an update on a First Alert Weather Day for at least parts of Mid-Michigan going into our Wednesday morning. Right now, the concern is our northern counties. However, we'll keep an eye on things as we go throughout tonight, and we'll assess how things develop as the evening goes along. Freezing rain, especially when we've got these warm type systems going into the spring months here ahead. Even though we're still in winter, as we get closer to that point, these warm fronts can sometimes be a little bit tricky with the cold air and some of that colder water and all those different things around the Great Lakes region. Sometimes warm fronts that you think are going to go a certain amount of distance north, they eventually get hung up and they don't always go to the north. So we don't expect that to happen this time around, but I would be lying if I said it's not something that we'll keep an eye on for tonight, just to be on the safe side as we always do. The areas that are currently under winter weather advisories, those areas are expecting about 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch of ice. And it's once we start getting into that territory that we're starting to talk more about maybe some tree damage, some minor tree damage. We're talking about branches falling down or at least trees going under stress. And that's especially true as you get closer to about 1/4 of an inch of ice, not always when you get 1/10. But also you're starting to talk about power outages when you get close to 1/4 and anything above that. So we thought it was appropriate to issue a First Alert Weather Day for that. Right now it is primarily just for the northern counties. As you go further to the south, it's important to make this distinction, is the areas that are not under the First Alert Weather Day. We're talking areas like Mount Pleasant, Midland, Bay City, and even over into portions of Huron County. Almost if you follow US 10 or if you're a little bit further south along 46 and go over into the Thumb, we do think there's at least a possibility that some of those areas could see a brief period of freezing rain. And we think there's a possibility that there could be a glaze in certain spots, and this map fits that a little bit more appropriately. But those areas are not under the First Alert Weather Day, at least for now, because it seems like a shorter window for any freezing rain, and it also seems like we'll have a chance to warm up a little bit sooner. And so with that, we just felt the impacts were a little bit greater the further north you go. And you can also see that when it comes to the winter weather advisory map. That was issued by the National Weather Service in Gaylord and also the National Weather Service in Grand Rapids. And that time is wrong, so let me change that really quick. That is until 7 p.m. on Wednesday. For those, we did not change that from the winter storm watch earlier. It had a lot to do, of course, this afternoon, and that was just a little bit of an oversight. So until 7 o'clock on Wednesday is when those advisories go until. If everything stops and everything is moving in the right direction ahead of that time, no question that those can be canceled early if needed. But what I think this suggests is that we are going to see some of those slippery roads probably linger after that precipitation comes to an end. We will be warming up. I think we get above freezing in a lot of areas by the afternoon, but it's going to take some time to melt off, especially if we get 1/10 of an inch of ice up to about 1/4. My hope is that tonight we get this done and the road crews can get out. They can do any treatment on that, and we can be in a better position by the evening commute tomorrow. But one thing that's a little tricky, and I speak this in general terms, is I know there are strategies to try to combat this, but I also know that freezing rain is a little bit more difficult because there are certain treatments that you can't just wash away. And so it's not like wintertime where you can get out there ahead of the game with salt and snow. Is freezing rain is attacked a little bit differently. So I would say if you're in one of our counties that is under the winter weather advisory for now, I would plan on the worst of it, of course, being early in the day. But I would also say don't expect things to just magically, once we get to the afternoon and everything stops, I wouldn't necessarily expect everything to just go back to being completely fine, at least right away. We will warm up and we're still going to be above average for much of this week, but it is going to take some time. Thankfully, it does not look like we're getting up to like a 1/2 inch or more. This does not look like a repeat of March of 2025 or anything like that, but it will be a nuisance. And I think a scattered power outage here and there is possible in areas that pick up about 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch of ice. In the meantime, tonight before we get there, we're also dealing with a little bit of fog, especially near the lakeshore, so be careful with that. I do think what happens later on tonight is we will start to see the rain occur, and that will eventually start disrupting that fog, if you will. It starts to break it up, and you get some, it doesn't form that uniform big wall of cloud at the surface. It just kind of disperses everything a little bit more as that rain falls. So I'm not expecting overly dense fog to linger all night. I think there are some pockets on the front end here. But I think by the morning commute tomorrow, for those of you who don't have to deal with freezing rain, I don't necessarily think you're having to deal with a lot of pockets of dense fog either. I think you'll get that mistiness, and I think you'll get some of that haze, but I don't think it'll be overly dense like it has been at times the last couple of mornings in the absence of any precipitation. But of course, our main concern continues to be those areas to the north, and this is the Winter Storm Severity Index. And I'll pull this map up. It's going to take a second to load. But what this does is it usually breaks down, and it's based on an algorithm. But what it usually does is it takes a lot of different factors and puts them together. So it'll take factors like blowing snow in certain situations. It'll take freezing rain into account, how much liquid, how much snow, all different types of things. And what it does is it puts a map together that kind of assesses where the worst of the conditions will be. Now, this is a little bit of a change. Actually, I know why it's a bit of a change, because it's looking into Thursday. So let me change that really quick. But what that map does, and you'll be able to see it here in a minute, is it assesses where the worst of the conditions will be, and it kind of highlights where we need to pay a little bit more attention. So let me just load that up. While that does that, here we go. I'll catch up on some comments really quick while that loads. Let's see, we've got Brooklyn, Sherry, Stacy, Veronica. Linda saying we had super foggy conditions today. Yeah, it's been foggy quite a bit. Foggy by M46 Meyer on Gratiot. Hemlock, also foggy, but not as foggy as earlier. Thanks, Bruce. Brandon Henderson, what are we thinking on closings for northern counties? I think there's a decent chance we get some closings or delays. And I would probably say I don't expect things to be done by 10 o'clock. And so if we're getting freezing rain all the way up through about lunchtime or so, I'd probably lean closing for those northern counties. But now that this graphic is loaded, you can see that. A lot of where you see the areas of yellow primarily refer to areas where road conditions are the main concern, but not much else. The areas that are starting to get shaded in orange, so portions of Roscommon, portions of Ogemaw County. It was showing a little bit in Iosco County earlier. This updates every so often, so it does fluctuate a little bit. But you can see where the orange is in the vicinity. And so if you're in Iosco County, I would say it's fair game for you too. Harrisville and Alcona County, some of that's showing up too. But what orange means is it means not only are road conditions potentially a little bit more dicey, but this is talking about things like, okay, maybe we have some issues with infrastructure. So what would that mean? That would start to mean you've got issues with power lines and power outages and those types of things. So you can clearly see where the worst is expected with this algorithm. Anywhere that you see the yellow shading, that starts to extend down into places like Clare County, Aranac County, Gladwin County. You've got a gray shaded area where we've got some lower end impacts. So winter driving conditions are usually expected in these areas. We're not expecting like big problems, but we're still expecting maybe some slippery spots here and there. I think the one area that I do think is worth watching a little bit more to see if we see a change in the morning is perhaps portions of Huron County. I would say the northern portions of Huron County especially. If it takes a little bit longer for some of that warm air to move off to the northeast, could we have a slightly more prolonged threat for freezing rain in Huron County? Perhaps. So I would say watch that area. But I think areas like Midlands, Bay County, Isabella, even over into Tuscola, and I would say even down to, again, about M46 here. I think those areas are kind of where the cutoff would be. I think that's where we could see maybe that brief glaze of ice before things warm up enough. So I would say slippery spots in those areas are in play, but not necessarily expecting them to be as prolonged as some of these areas that are a little bit further to the north. And so that's where kind of things stand through tonight. So let's get to the hour-by-hour forecast just to show kind of what we're expecting here moving through the next several hours. Is I think primarily we're expecting most of this to hold off until after midnight, and then it will start building in as the night goes along. Notice where the pink shading is most persistent. It's in those areas that are a little bit further to the north. And some of this rain could be heavy at times as it comes through. Thankfully, it's not going to stick around long. So there's no flood watches in place for the moment. Even with all the melting snow we've had, conditions are still drier. We're doing better with the drought than we were a couple of months ago. And remember, that drought is long-term, not short-term. That's why we could never seem to get rid of it. It's going back not till even just last October. It's the October before that. So we've been seeing some of these drought conditions for over a year, and we've gotten rid of a lot of it thanks to our snow from this winter. But we're still in a position where we're not expecting this rain on top of the snow melt that we've had this week to cause major flooding issues. Now, standing water, nuisance type water in yards and standing water on roads, that's possible. But as far as anything that's just going to lead to a mountain of water, we're not currently expecting that. Our rivers, I think, are in pretty good shape for the moment. Some of them are still 10 to 15 feet below flood stage. The last time I checked at some of the river gauges, so we're doing good there. But here's what I mean going towards 9:30 with Huron County. We're pretty much rain everywhere else, but then we still have some of these stubborn shades of pink as far out as 9:30 in Huron County, and even some of that lingering as far out as about 11:30. So we'll see how things look as we go through tonight and tomorrow. Let me just see what the temperature is in Huron County in Bad Axe. Let's see if we can get a sense of temperatures there. They are below freezing, so for what that's worth, I think that's something that we'll keep a close eye on throughout the night. But you've got Owasso at 38, Alma at 34, Saginaw 36. So a lot of these areas are above freezing already with that warm front coming through a little bit later tonight. So we'll see how much that can go down. But getting back to that hour-by-hour forecast again, so we get through the morning, these areas to the north, more persistent. If we cool off enough, there could be some snow and sleet mixed in there, but I do think the snow and sleet threat is a little bit further to the north towards areas like Alpena and north of there. There is a very close line between sleet and freezing rain. If we cool off just enough, that cold air layer, or excuse me, that warm air layer that usually leads to the freezing rain, if you shrink it, well, then you've got the melting snowflakes melting, but then they also have time to refreeze before they come to the ground. So that's where you get sleet. But I would still say that I think this is more leaning towards the freezing rain side of things rather than sleet. And you can see that again persisting as far out as about late morning. And then once we get to about 1 o'clock, things start to wind down and the rest of the day looks pretty good as far as getting rid of the wet weather. Now, I do think with how grungy this air mass has been, with how overly saturated it's been, with the melting snow, with the fog, with what is incoming, with the moisture that's on the way for tonight, could we probably see some drizzle or mist linger in spots going into Wednesday evening? I don't think that's impossible. I just think we're done with the precipitation that's falling from the sky efficiently by the time we get to the afternoon. So anything beyond that point would be nuisance type precipitation. But I will say, just looking at this model run right here, you see these little areas of pink. That makes me wonder if there's a little drizzle or freezing drizzle that's going to try to linger through the evening. So I think we'll need to be aware of that. But again, these are our expectations for now. Meteorologist Matthew Mondro will be in tomorrow morning to have the latest if there's any additional advisories added. For instance, if the Weather Service in Detroit, is overly cautious with portions of Huron County as well, could we see maybe an additional advisory there? I don't think that's off the table. We'll see what happens with that. But the further south you go, Genesee, Shiawassee, Lapeer, most of Gratiot, most of Tuscola, most of Saginaw, most of Sanilac, these areas will be primarily rain. And then it's this transition zone where we might see slippery roads for at least a time. And then it's further to the north where we see the best odds of about 1/10 of an inch of ice up to maybe a quarter. And so those are the areas that we're watching as close as possible. Here's a look at the rainfall totals. I think a 1/2 inch to an inch makes the most sense when it comes to the amount of rain this time around, which again we can handle. Nuisance type flooding, standing water in streets, those things not unexpected with this. But as far as any flood advisories or flood warnings, don't expect that to happen, at least as of now. So with that, I'll take a look at what we've got in the comments here. Lori, Pigeon was foggy most of the day. Yeah, we talked a little bit on the stream last night about how I think areas downwind of Lake Huron and the Saginaw Bay could be a little foggy today. And it certainly seems like that followed through. Good to see Nick from New Lothrop. Brandon, glad you got your answer. Vicky, good evening. Mike, shouldn't have to worry about ice between Bay City and Saginaw tomorrow early afternoon. No, Mike, I think by early afternoon, even if a glaze happens there, I think we'll probably be in better shape in Saginaw and Bay City by then. And to be honest, Saginaw and Bay City are in a position where you could be good the whole time. I think it's really, these freezing rain events are very frustrating because you're threading a needle. And a lot of times they're now casting events where you're just watching things so closely and how things evolve. And are there going to be stubborn areas along that warm front? Say further inland towards Mount Pleasant, is that warm front going to have no problem getting as far north as Mount Pleasant? And then as you start getting closer to those areas of ice, say on the Saginaw Bay or Lake Huron, is it going to have a tough time dislodging some of that cold air that's over those ice areas out of the way? So instead of a uniform warm front that's going like this and just passes straight through to the north, are you getting little kinks along that warm front where you start to get, maybe one area gets to the 40s, another is stuck in the low 30s. So my gut feeling says Saginaw and Bay City are okay, but again, it's kind of where those boundaries can sometimes set up in these instances, so we'll see what happens. Let's see. Looks like freezing rain for Alger and West Branch. Yeah, Tammy, I would expect freezing rain for Alger and West Branch. Those are the areas we have included in the first alert weather day. Bruce did see 10 vehicles at the driving range at Crooked Creek Golf today, so that's it's a positive sign that we might be around the corner here. Tammy also asked what was causing the air pollution problem. So the easiest way that I can describe that is it's nothing new. I know that has been one of the most popular comments that we've gotten. We haven't covered it as much as Detroit because we haven't had as much concern here. But a lot of people have said, I've never heard of this before. Well, science and technology evolves. We have better ways of sensing things. We have better ways of communicating things. So we might not have communicated it as well years ago as we do now. But essentially what you get is it's almost like if you were to take a pile of snow outside and after it's been, sitting for weeks and you've been shoveling, the plow trucks have come through, all of that parking lot snow at the grocery store. If you were to take a big chunk of that and you were to take it home and throw it in a bucket and let it melt, well, you would get all the dirt, you'd get all the salt, you'd get all the garbage that's in that snow in the bucket. You'd see just water that's just dirty. And so the best way I can describe that air pollution problem is as that snow melts, well, instead of just melting it in a bucket, that it evaporates. We get the sunshine out, the water evaporates, you get the water vapor. Well, as the water vapor evaporates, it's kind of like chemicals when you're cleaning at home. It evaporates up into the air. And so if you get a certain amount of pollution in that melting snow that's evaporating up into the air, well, then you get problems with air quality. So that's where that comes from. It's not new. Again, it just might be a better way of communicating things. Social media also tends to communicate things better. It pops up in our mind more often when we're seeing things on social media, or they're advertised digitally a little bit better than maybe they were in the past. So that's not necessarily just commenting on your question, Tammy. It's just kind of what I've seen on social media. As far as, we've never heard of this before. That might be why. Carly asks, how are the roads looking for Bay City for the school commute? I think it really depends on how much of a glaze we get and how temperatures cooperate for Bay City. Because again, an area like Bay City or Midland, I think a lot of it depends on how quickly you can warm up once the rain starts. I think there's potential where an area like Saginaw, which is currently, let me see the current temperature there. An area like Saginaw that's at 34, Alma's at 34, are those areas even going to drop below freezing tonight? MBS is at 32. And so I think, if Bay City comes up within an hour or two of that rain starting, well then, you might only have a little bit of ice to deal with at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and then by the time school starts and the bus routes go, you could be in better shape. So I think Bay City's a close call. I would at least plan on the potential of slippery spots, but I certainly don't think it's guaranteed. And so if you're a parent of a Bay City student, a Midland student, Saginaw student, I would plan on going tomorrow, and maybe you're surprised depending on how the roads are tomorrow morning. It's really tough to say. Riley, do you think there will be heavy fog from SVSU to Bay City in the morning? No, I think once you get past the morning, or once you get rain started tonight, again, that rain kind of disrupts the fog. It kind of disturbs that uniform cloud at the bottom. It's almost like if you were to poke holes in something, those raindrops poke holes in that uniform area of fog. So good to see you on the chat, Riley. I hope you're doing well. Cassie, what about Midland around 6 a.m.? I think Midland's probably in the same boat as Bay City. Cristobal say, Joseph, depends on where you're asking for. Nick, any storms expected for Shiawassee County? I think thunder is possible, especially as you go south. But I do not expect any severe weather at this time. So let me see if I can pull up. Typically we don't pull this graphic up during the winter months very often, but let me just see if it's popping up. This is the severe weather outlook, but it will just show general thunderstorms for tonight. And then tomorrow, it says Sunday afternoon, but I'm just pulling it up quickly. It looks like it gives a chance for thunder for pretty much everybody. Again, ignore the Sunday afternoon because I haven't edited this graphic, but this is for tomorrow. And we are in the non-severe thunderstorm category. So don't be surprised if you hear some of that. Joseph, you are absolutely right. You don't have to shovel rain. You don't have to shovel rain in piles at the end of your driveway either after the plows go by. I finally got rid of some of that. Just the timing of the last time we got snow, and about as quickly as I could clear the snow off the driveway, that big pile at the end of my driveway already froze, so it finally started to melt. So I just didn't have the time to remove it before it really got rock hard. So I will not miss shoveling or snow blowing, even though snow blowing is kind of fun in a way. Jeremy, I would say 6 a.m. in West Branch, probably not ideal, unfortunately. And for anybody who has to deal with the freezing rain, I don't know if you feel the same way I do. I'd rather have a foot of snow. I just cannot stand freezing rain. Any amounts. It's just a nuisance to deal with. So that's kind of where things stand for tonight. Again, brief glaze before a possible warm-up, but stay tuned. If this map needs to be adjusted in the morning, Matthew will have updates starting at 4:30. Any necessary updates social media-wise he will have before that. So like I said, this is one area that I think is going to be interesting. So if anybody is on the stream tonight, well, it kind of went away in this latest model update that just came through. But if there's an area where I think it's worth watching, I'll just point it out manually, as I think portions of Huron County, if that warm front gets a little stubborn and is slow to move into this region and things are slow to warm up, could we be on the edge of an advisory in Huron County? Perhaps. So that's something that I think is worth watching through tonight. School closings, northern counties, probably a pretty good chance, which is probably something that that parents don't want to hear right now. For some of those schools, you've had so many days off, but I think there's certainly a chance, and I would lean, just because of the timeline and the fact that it's still going to be raining potentially late in the morning before things start to warm up a little bit in some of those stubborn areas. I'd probably say a closure is more realistic than a delay, because I don't think if it's a 2-hour delay that takes you to, say school starts at 7:30 to 9:30, 3-hour delay to 10:30, still probably raining at that point. So I think if there's a decision on schools to the north, it'll be a closure versus a delay. Just my opinion though. And hopefully, honestly, this is one, anytime freezing rain's in the forecast, I hope it doesn't pan out, to be quite honest with you. It's just a mess to deal with. So we will end the live stream there. We'll have our 10 o'clock newscast coming up, and of course I'll see all of you at 11. But be careful on the roads. Tomorrow morning we'll have the latest for you on traffic flow and things like that for Wake Up. You can always get the updates in the app. Matthew will, I'm sure, have some of those as we go through tomorrow. And we will obviously keep you posted on everything else. So take care of yourselves. We'll see you tomorrow, and we'll start talking about Friday, which I haven't even really had a chance to digest yet, but it could be a little messy going into Friday as well. We'll keep you posted on that. In the meantime, thank you all for watching. Thanks for making this stream worthwhile, and we will see you tomorrow night.